Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to do the Post-NESARA series videos. We're going to focus we're going to do a two-parter on this one because I started seeing a lot more information. The first one is more going to be about inflation. Now, we'll relate a little to price because that's part of it, and the gold-backed currency. So we'll get into that one coming right up. So again, we're going to get into a two-parter. I just kind of decided that this morning as we were looking at this. So a lot of people ask this question, like no inflation. And they're like, and here's what happens. When we go in through the NESARA gate, it becomes a gold-backed currency called the US note. And you might have heard me talk about this. The US dollar is based upon a fiat. Now, current economic thinking is that fiats obviously have an expansion and a contraction phase. Expansion means they need more money to accomplish the needs of a society, for instance, right? So, for instance, if they're looking for economic growth, they will expand the currency a bit. But if you're really, if you see the economic growth pulling back because of inflation issues rising, you actually deflate the money to get it within a more reasonable rate. And that's why you would raise rates, interest rates. So raising those interest rates decreases the money flow in essence, and that's what it's supposed to do. So when you increase you increase those rates, it should control inflation. And that's it's actually breaking all the rules. You see, in the 70s and 80s, we saw a rise in inflation, and we also started to see the rates rise. And so to pull inflation down so that we can control the costs, we started to see obviously rates were going up and prices started to fall a little bit as people started to contract their thinking. Now, we saw an expansion in the early to middle 80s. So people always think, Ronald Reagan, 80 to 88, it was like the great times in the beginning. The answer is it took a few years before we started to see those rates start to come down because the economy was starting to get back on its feet again. Now, obviously, the 70s, this is part when Nixon took us off of the gold international rate. Okay. So that's part of what that was about. And they were trying to because they were in another bankruptcy. Remember, every time we have that gas dip was a false flag in the early 70s. And so it really lasted for several years there until they, controlled the oil. But what happened is that gold was stuck 35 bucks, went up to as much as $60, $70. In the early 80s, it spiked dramatically up. I mean, early 80s or even 90s, it was spiking up to 600 bucks. And, that's a massive change in that thing. Yet the currency had nothing to do with it because what we had is an oil-backed currency. This is the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. Now, I'm going to show you some of that kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting when you see this on the screen here with that too. Now, I just did some calculations or some statistics that you're going to get to see here. And so let me pull this off the screen because that, the big question is how does this actually work? And then we'll explain a little bit more here, okay? So first off, when we look at the screen, we see that inflation. This is done by the Fed, which is the Federal Reserve in St. Louis. It's kind of an interesting one. St. Louis is a very unique place. Actually, we know some of the insignias were taken away around 2021, 2022 in St. Louis. I mean, there's crazy things going on here. So look at this. We see inflation, rising dramatically here, 71, early 70s. We see inflation rising, and they pulled it back because they started to increase the rates. Now, inflation started, so we have inflation, which is consumer pricing. We start seeing it rise up, and it was becoming much more of a problem. So they were messing with the rates. And we see a peak in 1980 when Ronnie was in office with this too. So we see a massive amount of inflation that was occurring. So the Fed is pulling the rates up so that people weren't borrowing as much. Okay. And so the money flow is down, and we see this struggle. This is when, and then they started to see this really precipitous drop back around to the 60s, early 60s. And we were looking at Ronnie Reagan was like awesome with that too, because we were starting to see some defense spending and some other kinds of things kind of go up, and people were having better job issues. By the middle 80s, we were down to like 60s levels. So pricing was actually in a pretty good shape. Now, again, you can't compare a 86 car to a 1963 car. Although there was some similarity to it. I mean, there was still a price difference here versus the price difference here. This is why when people tell you, prices are going to go down in 1950s, I go, well, listen, my parents bought I'm trying to find the date here. I think it was around here, a car, 1976. Okay. We bought a car, a Granada in 1976 for $5,000. Okay. So it's a Ford Granada. Now, if we're talking about pricing like here, that's only about 10 years later or 15 years later. Now, when we come here, approximately 20 years later, cars were significantly more expensive than five, seven, $1,500, kind of $2,000 cars. You saw cars, and I remember because I was looking for one, and you had cars at 10, 12, 15,000, dollars. So if inflation is about the same, can they be the same price? And the answer is no. That's one of the things that gets you a little bit sideways when you look at this. Okay, so it stays relatively stable. Now, during the Bush era, it goes up a little bit. So then they control this, and it's been very consistent. Drops a little bit here, an interesting kind of level, and then watch this, whoosh, and it goes up dramatically. And this phase here, and people go, yeah, but it's not as bad as it was in 1980. Well, the prices and wages, when we change wage from here to here, obviously it's gone up, but the prices are so far out of reach. And here's what I want to show you about that. So when we look at consumer changes over time frame, so we're just looking from 97, a very short time frame, and you're going to see each one of these, okay? We can do college tuition down to televisions. Kind of interesting, technology points. So technology points of computer stuff, toys, these are technology points that happen. So when we see pricing, and you notice that pricing goes down dramatically with televisions over the years. Now they got better in their technology point, but how come they're going down in price? Well, that's one of the most fascinating parts that we see. It became easier to kind of create this. So the technology was easier to accomplish this thing, and there was less personal manufacturing. Okay. This actually occurred the same way in the early 20th century when cars were mass manufactured. But see, computers for the time frame and televisions were not mass manufactured up until, and obviously it was somewhat here, but we're seeing much more of the jump in manufacturing, specifically in computers. And then there's a lot more computerization in the TVs, right? Now, clothing has stayed pretty darn stable overall. New cars have gone up by 23%. That is a scary number. That's 25 years of 23%. Public transportation, 43%. Food, this should be one of the most basic things that we look at. And food is 100% up. Housing is up by 104%. Energy, 118. Medical care, 134%. These should be some of the basic points that we live with. But then we see some of the craziest numbers here, which is tuition 200% up in this kind of way. So we're just seeing school fees, tuition, childcare, just raising your kid through that time frame is up, up by almost 200%, but then send them to college, forget it. And this is the difficulty that happens, and this is where a lot of the gaps start coming in. And so to get this, they have to create loans, and people are sidled with this. Okay, show you another one. Have healthcare risen? And the statistic isn't always exactly the point that we're looking for 2024, but you can see the healthcare. There's a separator in 2009. Why is there a separator between the GDP, the gross domestic product, versus what healthcare price happens? Well, this is Obamacare. Guys, this is what Obamacare did. The GDP was only rising a smaller amount, and yet healthcare was going out of sight. That's not what Obamacare was supposed to do. Well, that's what you do when you throw in a 1,000-page document. And so it goes up just in dramatic portion. So we have it up 21% over just a 10-year period of time from 08 to 2018. Let's look at house prices. This is about a 20-year span from right here in 2020. We're just doing the 0 point here. And we're seeing some of these prices that on average are up 100% in almost 25 years, so 24 years-ish. And this isn't even, this is doing a 20-year span here. So in 20-year span, you're talking over 100% increase in prices with this too. Okay, this is partly inflation. That's why we have inflation together. Now, this is the lie. Now, I pulled this up here, and it's a reader's question, and they said, what happens if a major currency gets backed by gold? It means a country would not be able to increase the money supply, kind of thing, right? The exchange rate should be fixed against other countries. That means they would depress the exchange. So for instance, if the US dollar and we go to a gold-backed note, what they would want to do is reduce how much that you would get. This is what these cabal idiots want to do to you. Okay? They would want to reduce it. Like, for instance, if you gave $1, you might only get, let's make up a number, 30 cents. Pick a number that you feel more comfortable with that. Because they would devalue that new currency because it's more valuable to them. See, they don't want to lose money, but they don't care if you lose money. That's how they think. Now, here's a fascinating part about inflation. Do you notice that in 1913, inflation is 0? What's 1913? The initiation of the Fed and the IRS. It's 0. When we start into World War I, we start seeing the inflation rate rising so dramatically that by the up to the middle of World War I, it's ugly. This is when poverty was hitting a dramatic amount. Now, soon as the war ends, we stopped spending money foreign, and this is why they were starting to look at this. So people started spending money in America. We had it, the Roaring 20s, all the good things that came up with it. It goes up a little bit here, stabilizes, and then it goes into a negative level during the Depression. This is when they were making money off of the people. Okay, so people were making money here. But this is when they were kind of worried, the cabal was worried that people were going to have more money, and now they had to take it away from them. Great Depression. I mean, the stock market collapsed in 29, Great Depression. And then we see a precipitous rise here. And you're going, wait a second, what is in 1940? World War II. You see how wars actually increase inflation because we're spending abroad. This is actually proof that almost all wars are money wars. Okay, so what happens is that we lower the inflation with the ability to print money, expand the money supply. Inflation is likely to be lower. Do you catch what he's saying? Without the ability to print money and expand the money supply, inflation is lower. No, inflation goes to zero when we go back currency. This is the lie. Deflation. The problem is that if there's a limited expansion of the money and we have an overvalued exchange rate, the economy could easily end up with deflation. See, that's what they want to tell you so that we, the Fed, will fix it all for you. You see? Now, debt deflation. So we're talking about debt. So when debt comes in, it causes, if a gold standard causes deflation, like in the 20s and 30s, we would likely have a debt deflation. And this is what they were talking about, the 20s and 30s. And you're going, guys, this is the sickness of their systems. This is how they think. The constraint on economic growth. A gold standard could easily act as a constraint on growth because they want to add more money, and you add more money and you devalue a currency with this too. So here's the thing. They're trying to give you this point. We had a lot of increase of an unemployment, and yet we have this great expansion or a great issue with the real GDP. Now this is UK, so it's exactly the same kind of thing. But here's the thing: debt increases when you pulled up the cabal Federal Reserve. The cabal Federal Reserve just adds more debt like crazy. Is that the good thing? See, the price of gold, when you look at it from here, it stays very consistent until the 70s, where they started to rise it. And then up in the 90s, we talked about this a second ago, it spikes. So they had to decrease basically take away some of the money supply. We started seeing a decrease in that. And yet it stayed pretty stable, and now it's moving upward. It's obviously going up to massive amounts. This is how they think of it for you. Okay. So let me pull this off the screen. Sorry. Okay. But here's the key. What a gold-backed note done by Treasury. See, if we let the Fed do a gold-backed note, then what occurs is that they will screw with it in every way, just like we're talking about here. That's why their concepts are not the concepts that we need to work with, okay? Because the Fed is going to, if they had the gold-backed currency, they would screw with debt. They would create debt out of sight, which would devalue our currency. And the answer is, I'm not doing the middle finger here, but we're not going to do that with you, right? I'll just do this one. And the answer is, we're not doing that because we're going to go to a constitutional basis, which is why these guys don't get it. And they actually don't want to get it. So when you are in a gold-backed currency, just like I showed you before, without the Fed, there's zero inflation. The statistics prove it. They've always talked to you about an inflation and deflation model, the Fed and fiat and confidence in our economy, because fiat means a confidence in the monetary supply. And who tells you the confidence levels? There's two separate entities that want to tell you that: government and banks. Those are what drive the the policy, the mentality. And then they actually go out and teach the kids in the universities. So that's all they ever believe. And that's why we have really good economists out there who are even awakened, some level of awakening. And I like these people. But the problem is they can't see through the blinders of what the Fed is actually doing. And I just showed the other day that Thomas Massey actually put together a fascinating route. And in his statement, it was an abolishing of the Fed. And it's a new bill that's out. And don't worry about if it passes or not. It's a calm. It's going to die. It already is in its death, and the death will become final soon. But I want to leave you with this point. We've all heard of BOGO, buy one, get one free. Basically, what it means is that you buy this little type of thing, 2 loaves of bread, and you get one free. What is BOGO? BOGO means that I'm trying to use this as a draw. It can be a bait and switch, or it just can be a draw. Now, if it's a pure draw in, for instance, groceries, or whatever that choice might be. Actually, it can be in the computer industry. It can be in different things, right? So they bring you in. They will buy one set of batteries, for instance, a pack of batteries, and you get one pack free. But they don't just sell batteries. They're doing all kinds of other electronics, right? You need the electronics, driving the batteries, right? It's the same kind of thing. Now, what BOGO does, we have other unscrupulous kind of people who do buy one, get one free, and it becomes a bait and switch. What is a bait and switch? Bait and switch is when there's nothing else that they can do. They're doing a buy one, get one free, but they have no intention of selling that to you. So they'll put little caveats beside it. And it's so fascinating. It's just so much lie. Like, we see this in the hearing aid industry when some idiots say, buy one, get one free. And I've had patients call me and I'm going, do you understand? You buy one hearing aid and you get one free. How many times are you going to go back to them? What do you mean? I remember having this one conversation with one woman, got to be 20, 25 years ago. I'm like, are you going to go buy another set of hearing aids in next year, later this year? She goes, no. And I said, the normal span is 5 to 7 years before you replace hearing aids. Long story. But buy one, get one free. What they do is they raise up the price to a set of hearing aids and call it buy one, get one free. What? This is how they do it. That's really the same thing as bait and switch, but they told you through lie. Here's what I believe is changing. When you have a fiat currency that has no value, a valueless type of currency, excuse me, a valueless type of currency, what would occur is this buy one, get one free, the bait and switch, the stealing of, your funds. And this is all part of the fiat. Okay. It's all part of the banking. That's why they never really clamp down on really all of the credit card stealing and ID stealing of you, because it's just part of what they like to do. When you see a deletion of the Fed and a return to a gold-backed principle through the Constitution, you will see a value proposition that increases dramatically. And we'll explain that in the next video with us. But that value proposition that goes up will mean that you are going to walk in there and go, listen, for you to get my money, you better prove to me this works, whatever that might be. This is valuable. If I'm going to give you value, you better give me value back. And this is the power that is about to come. And when companies provide a value, a significant value, people will be ready to spend for that. Because what's going to happen is that prices are going to drop. And we'll show you more about that in the next video. But guys, this is the exciting part. But to business owners, to business leaders, and to truthers and patriots out there, I want you to rethink what a gold-backed currency does to value. You will need to create value, and because the EBS is going to destroy consumer confidence in the Walmarts and the wall, all the wall whatevers, right? All the different circumstances, the Dollar Trees and everything else. It's going to destroy their confidence because you're going to see the gross things that they're doing, the crimes against humanity. And once that occurs, you're going to say, wait a second, how can I create a value for people? This is where business will happen. So that you will have to have transparency. You have to show your value to the people. That's a great thing. You guys should be really excited about that. That should trigger in you new thoughts you have not considered. And I promise you, I've been thinking about that ever since I wrote, Revelations of the Red Pill. And you can find Revelations of the Red Pill at, and I'm going to show you this in a second, at drscottyoung.com. Let's give you that little site here. It's coming up on the screen. At drscottyoung.com, you can actually download Understanding NESARA. You can see some, you can check out some of the videos. This is where you want to find a lot of different things. There's a poster on tribulation. You can download it, just kind of get it in there. There's a whole bunch of other free downloads. I'm giving you free downloads, and you can buy the books as well with this too. But you can also find my social media sites, okay? Now, by the way, I haven't taken this off because I can't go into TikTok. And it's funny because if you went to TikTok right here, this account is deleted. This is what they did to me, okay? So the reality is you can find everything in here with that. And you can also look in the bookstore and you can see Revelations of the Red Pill to get a little bit more information, okay? You can always donate if you'd like to. That would really help me out. But it's really up to you. That's not my push and desire in that way with that too. So I hope that helps you out. We will talk about price in the next video. Thank you so much.